left, right.
Yo, what is up? So this is going to be an interesting episode. I feel as if I might be pissing some people off, but really, my goal is to have a conversation around making people stronger and more tolerant and just people living better lives through not getting pissed off about everything. I don't know. You listen to the episode, listen to the podcast. Let me know on the other end what you guys think. Shoot me a message, throw some comments out there. I'm curious your opinion on my opinion. This is SipTalk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Of course, let's go.
Cheers.
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 This is episode 93 of SipTalk. My name is Justin DiGiulio, joined by James the Bosnator Boswell. I am just outside of Manhattan in New Jersey, and James is in warm and toasty Charleston, South Carolina. What's the weather down there?
Today it was like low 80s and it's getting down to like 55 or 60 at night. It's pretty perfect, actually.
Holy shit. Yeah, that was our high for the day, I think.
Was 50 something?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. I don't go outside
No,
these days.
April and October are the two best months in Charleston.
Yeah, that I remember. We're getting there. We're almost there here in the city. So look, I brought up the fact we're going to be talking about feelings tonight. I feel like I'm going to piss a lot of people off, but my general thinking in terms of putting this together was really that your feelings don't matter.
What happened today to prompt this?
You know, I don't want to get too much into it.
No, you have to. That's the whole point.
But I don't want to get into too many details. Yeah. So look, we moved out to Jersey and we're buying a lot of new stuff, doing some major renovations. We got a decent deal, but I know there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Also moving out of a 750 square foot apartment in Manhattan into a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house. There's like a lot of stuff that's got to happen out here. Either way.
How many square feet?
I don't have any idea. A lot. The basement's huge. I'm in the basement right now.
Does the basement count towards square footage of the house?
I don't have any idea.
You're a real estate agent. You should know these things.
Well, I guess if it's a finished basement, they would count it. But I'm not counting it. I don't know the answer for this particular place. Didn't matter. I saw the house. I liked it. But look, so renovating the kitchen. I told you we gutted the kitchen, right? Yep. And the kitchen had a door to the backyard and a small window in it. And it was next door to the dining room. So I took the wall down between the dining room and the kitchen. I think I showed you that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I did over the weekend was I put a giant hole in the side of the house. So I took the door off the side of the house. I knocked out the door frame. I took the window out of the side of the house. And then I jacked up the house, the second floor of the house. And I had to frame a window and put these big boards as headers and then some support boards because I'm taking out a structural wall. So I did that over the weekend. Very exciting. New refrigerator is supposed to come yesterday. Now, because of the pandemic and stuff like that, apparently there's a lot of back order on like cabinets and appliances, lots of furniture. It's been tougher to get. So this particular refrigerator matches the ovens and the dishwasher and the rest of the house. So we already bought the other appliances. So this particular refrigerator, being the matching refrigerator, is the one we need. It fell off the truck yesterday. They told me they were loading the truck. They were loading the truck with the refrigerator, and it was damaged beyond use. So the only thing I can imagine is they were hoisting it onto the truck and it fell off.
Okay.
Yeah, well, so that was frustrating yesterday. They told me it was going to be a 40-day wait time on a new refrigerator at least because they're all on back order.
Well, better buy some ice.
Oh, shit. Luckily, I I canceled that order. They sent a refund, and I was able to get a new refrigerator delivered today. So that was cool. So that was good news. But it's just been a rocky week, and this is where like feelings kind of come into it, because I feel like a lot of people would be like frustrated and really butthurt with a lot of stuff. But I'm on the train in the city this morning, and I get a call. We got a lease signing at 10. It's 9:36. All right, hold up. I think we're just making sure we're online here. So look. So I'm in transit in the city. It's 9:36. We have a lease signing in outside of Manhattan. So if anybody knows what it's like living in Manhattan, most people don't have cars. So the destination for the lease signing is the landlord's office, which is in like Westchester. So it's roughly 40 minutes north of the city. So either you have to take an expensive ass Uber to get there, or you have to find somebody with a car, borrow a car, something like that.
Can't take Metro North?
I don't, maybe, but then you would still need to get an Uber from there to the location of the office.
Okay. Why such an inconvenient location?
I have no idea. That's just the way they do business. It drives me fucking insane that I have to like orchestrate this with clients just to get a lease signed when it's 2021. There's landlords that are doing e-signing, digital signing, things like that. I told you this before, we still fax applications in some cases. So it's just wild. So clients, it's 24 minutes before the signing. So they're probably there already. They're probably parked and like waiting for the signing. Landlord calls me and said, hey, I was just typing the lease up, and I noticed that because this is a rent-regulated apartment, the guy has a mortgage, and the law says that you can't have a mortgage on a place and be renting a rent-stabilized apartment. So unfortunately, I have to kill the deal. Now, dude, the shitstorm that was unleashed from these clients, rightfully so, and we were approved a week ago, and we had to set up and orchestrate the signing. So like the clients are like, I'm sure the clients have already like orchestrated their move. They're planning on picking up keys today. They're already packed up. Mm-hmm. So
is the landlord going to have to pay for any of this inconvenience?
Well, so here's where my dilemma is as the broker, is that I now have to negotiate these things. I can tell the landlord, hey, dickhead, fuck you, you owe us. And the landlord's going to say, well, I don't really owe you anything, but you can argue with me, and then we'll just never do business again.
Well, I would say that you'd have a pretty strong court case with promissory estoppel.
Sure, for a couple grand, which is not worth the fucking time. But at the end of the day, I will no longer do business with that landlord because he just won't want to do business with me.
I wouldn't want to do business with a guy that leaves me hanging out to dry 20 minutes before a lease signing.
Do you know the amount of people that I don't want to do business with that I have to? We make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year from some accounts where, I wouldn't want to have lunch with somebody. That's, at the end of the day, though, they're nice apartments. And for the most part, people move in there. They're very happy there. It's just some people are very difficult to deal with in general. So that's where my issue is. Like I can create a big issue here and get my way and win, but it's ultimately a loss for me. So that's, we had to clean that up a little bit.
What did you do?
Well, we're trying to find, we talked them down. They know it's not really our fault, but they're not happy. And ultimately, at the end of the day, there needs to be a solution. And I would like to be involved in that solution rather than them go and rent with somebody else.
Well, of course.
So
but what are you going to do about the landlord? Because it's shitty behavior.
Just make sure that that doesn't happen again, because ultimately he was right. I wasn't aware of this law. And moving forward, just make sure that doesn't happen again. Dot all the I's, cross all the T's, and hopefully we make some money. That's what you got to do. Like I said, I deal with a lot of people that I get very frustrated with dealing with often, but that's doing business, and it's especially doing business in Manhattan. You're dealing with lots of different people, lots of different backgrounds. My feelings on her,
coming with this?
Well, it was a frustrating thing to start off with, and then when I came into the office today, before I came into the office today, I got wind that one agent sent a message to the other agent, kind of trash talking that other agent to their face, given the agent who sent the message was right, but it's just very brash and abrasive and piss the other person off. So now I have to deal with both people who are both pissed off with each other. And it's mostly because their feelings were hurt because they had expectations of the other person that weren't met. And now, it's just kind of this tippy toe line that I have to walk. And I think a lot of people think solutions to that are a lot easier than they are. But again, just like dealing with this landlord, I can tell the landlord to go fuck himself and he's wrong and he needs to make it right. And then we never do business together. And I can send people home and fire them because they're in bad moods and they're mean people. Or they're, not great agents / employees. But then I don't do business with these guys anymore. So, if I fire everybody that I don't like the way they do business, then I don't have a business. So I was just instantly dealing with clients who were really upset, which is an emotion, it's a feeling. And, whether they placed it on me or the landlord, they had every right to place it anywhere because they were just pissed and we were delivering the bad news and they needed a solution. And then going into the office, dealing with two different people's feelings that, it just made me think about how much your feelings don't matter and how people get so fucking worked up in their feelings. And that's kind of what got me started here. Cause on the train ride home, I was, the thing is, like, when I start dealing with somebody else, I really kind of match their attitude and their energy. And going into that, I started to match some of their energy. And that was very frustrating for me because I wanted to work out and come to a solution in that moment, even though I knew in the back of my head that it wasn't something that was going to be worked out. And the only way to work it out is either, basically that these guys need to understand that the world doesn't revolve around them. And that's just how the world works. They were both right and wrong. So the one was right to be pissed. Shit. The agents, yeah.
I wasn't sure if we were still talking about the landlord and the tenants that got shafted, or the agents that got into a tiff.
Yeah, well, but look, I gotta take my mind off that for a little bit because it even just kind of articulating what happened is frustrating for me. In other news, what are you drinking, by the way?
I'm drinking the finest box wine and a Busch Ice.
What is it? The Franzia box
wine? No. It's a step above that.
Oh, good for you. And a what? A Stella, you said, or Busch? What was it?
No, Busch Ice. Stella's terrible beer.
Never been a big fan of Stella.
Stella is the most overrated beer.
Yeah, I would. I used to. Now that I live in Jersey, but I used to call it Jersey piss water, even though it's a nice Italian beer. But
no, it's Belgian.
Is it? Oh, okay. Well, all right. So, but that's where that kind of Jersey Shore.
So, in my ranking of overrated beers, there's a top 3. Stella's at the top, Guinness is second, and Heineken is third. Ooh. And this is overrated beers. It's not that they're the worst beers. There are worse beers than these, but the worst beers are way cheaper and don't have the reputation of being a good beer.
But I don't see anybody giving hype to Guinness. I love Guinness. I don't see anybody giving it hype. They're like, "Oh, you drink that?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's decent. It's a nice beer." I was going to drink one tonight.
Guinness is overrated.
I don't think anybody rates
much better than it is.
Well, nah. You think? I think people don't drink it. I'll tell you, it's probably not a great beer. There are better stouts.
Pretty much any stout is better than Guinness.
Yes, exactly. But I think a lot of people
therefore overrated.
But I don't think people rate it. And it's a very available stout. All right, so look, either way, high point of my day, and then we'll get into some feelings. I'm browsing the Facebook Marketplace because now I'm looking for. I got a lot of furniture to buy, a lot of stuff to buy, but I happened to stumble across a Triumph Spitfire on the Facebook Marketplace, 1980. It's classic green. I shared it with Rosh earlier today. Classic green car, and I'm a big fan of Triumph. You know how much it was selling for? 1980.
$7,500.
$3,000.
Probably doesn't run.
No, it did. It did.
Probably doesn't run well.
So it looked to me like it was just a woman who just wanted to get rid of the car, and she sold it the same day. So she actually never answered me, and it was listed as sold a few hours later. But But then I went down this line of like pricing out Triumph. Triumph, for anybody who's listening or watching, I have a Triumph motorcycle. This is a Triumph car. They're completely different brands, both British brands. Maybe in the past at some point they were the same company. I don't. James, you know anything about that?
No.
I don't think they were though. But there's really no correlation these days. Triumph was a classic British sporty type small car.
Kind of like MG.
MG is what I was going to say. Yeah. But I have a bit of a tie to Triumph, the car, because way before I ever owned a Triumph motorcycle. Do you remember the Triumph TR3 that I had?
Yeah, which never ran, and we gradually took further and further apart until we got way above our heads and didn't know how to put it back together.
Disassembly is much easier than assembly. So
there were a lot of spare parts.
So for anybody who doesn't know anything about this story of this Triumph TR3, my father was younger. He used to work on this car with his father. His father passed away. My father went and lived on his life and put this car at my grandmother's house. So it sat kind of in the back of my grandmother's house, covered with a tarp for the majority of my life. My father passed away, and then my grandmother passed away a few years after that. And I think it was when she passed away, the car was, when they sold her home, the car was brought over to my house, and it sat at my house for a while. And then we had the great idea we were going to restore it. Now, it's a classic British car from the 50s or 60s, but it has been sitting outside, covered with a tarp, kind of damp and wet and full of rust. So this car was worth very little. It was kind of a rusty pile of lousy, non-working car parts, and it had 2 engines. So at some point we decided we were going to restore it, started taking things apart, realizing literally nothing on this thing was salvageable. I think at some point in time, maybe it did run. I don't know, but
I never saw it run.
Not in my lifetime, or at least my adult lifetime. But I think my mom may have had the interior replaced for my father, probably before I was born. So the interior was in nice shape, but the mechanics of the car not in very good shape. I think we cleaned it. It was so rusty. I think we armor-rolled the exterior of the car, which is not.
But I remember us like taking out, like we were able to get as far down as taking like the engine block off. We weren't able to take like the full engine out, but we took like the head off.
Yeah, and we thinking that we could replace it, and if
the whole engine block was just rust.
Yeah, everything was rusted. Everything needed to be replaced. There no seals, gaskets were any good. So if we had money back then, we probably could have done something to it. We may have been able to get an engine to turn over by replacing the parts, a couple $1,000, but we didn't. I had a great idea to sell it on eBay, and a guy in France bought it. Do you remember the story?
I remember you got way more money than you should have for it.
Well, I don't know about that. It sold for like $6,000, and the guy paid me, and he sent a car shipping service over, picked it up, and hauled it out. And I never heard from the guy again. I did find out afterwards that my mom reached out to the guy. Somehow she got his information. My mom is a very kind-hearted person, and offered to refund him some money if the car wasn't up to his standards, because he bought it from how old were we? 16, 17 years old, probably.
I feel like you sold it when we were like 18 or 19.
Yeah. I think it had to be before 18, because my mom reached out to this guy saying that she'd refund him some money, which I don't believe that she did, but that was a definite win at that point in time. But yeah, so I got a little bit of a tie to the Triumph, and now I went down this wormhole where I'm like following these cars, like, fuck, if I can score a car for a couple of grand, that's, even if it needs some work, that could be like a nice passion project. Plus I'm driving this beat up old pickup truck, so it would be nice to have something a little more agile.
All right, so let's get into the feelings thing. Let's try and get something that we can get some comments on as well. We can interact a little bit, but yeah. I think it's really easy to say that feelings don't matter when you don't have them.
Well, what was your so when I told you we were going to be talking about feelings, what was your comment to me?
It was 2 people on the spectrum talking about how feelings don't matter.
Exactly, but
so we're not really the best ambassadors here.
But we still have feelings, and And what I was thinking when I was trying to frame this discussion was just that, is it better to be logic driven or emotion driven? So you can still have feelings, emotions, but if you're driven by them, is that superior to being driven by logic?
Well, there's the answer I want to give, and then there's probably the real answer.
Okay.
The answer that I want to give is that it's better to be logic driven, because then you're going to be making the most rational and optimal decisions at all times. However, when you do that, and I don't remember the name of this study, but there was a psychological study where they basically had people watch behaviors of other people. So like a video of somebody behaving in a scenario or whatever. And so one of the series of videos was of somebody basically acting only on logic the entire time. So they'd have like some people that were very emotional, some people that were extremely logical, and then probably like something in the middle. But when they had people observe the person who was acting purely on logic, all of the people that were watching and rating the personality traits or whatever rated the person as like a psychopath.
Well, that's because that to me seems much more psychopathic.
Well, it is. And so
because
the
you're not
question
experiencing
is
emotion.
Yeah, is behaving purely on logic and reason the best way to go through life? And I would like to say yes, because that's generally how I go about things. But the answer is no. The answer is you can't act purely on logic.
Well, you're gauging this off what other people are saying in the study.
Well,
who got further in life?
The other answer, well, the other extreme of going purely off of emotion and feelings all the time leads to making really poor decisions because you're not considering the full ramification of your actions. So the answer is somewhere in the middle, which is you have to let feelings guide some of your actions, and you have to let logic guide other parts of your actions. And you have to be smart enough to know which situation you're in and which lane you're supposed to pick.
Sure, I agree with you there. For me,
and the skill comes in figuring out which lane you're supposed to be in.
Well, for me, in running a business, dealing with other people's emotions has been, because I can, for the most part, I'm able to kind of logically decide what's the best decision here, but I have to deal with other people's emotions. And that's what's very frustrating for me. I feel like I have a pretty good gauge in terms of my own logic and emotions and making decisions that, that I feel are the better, of the influence decisions, whether it's influenced by logic or emotion. But it's dealing with other people's emotions that I find to be very, very frustrating.
So Gabrielle de Campos says very few people are logic driven. The majority get caught up with emotion. I think she's right. And that's why, like, when you see someone acting purely on logic, and if you want to think like the extreme, think Rain
Man. Yes.
Where that's pure logic, and you're just like, you can't live your life that way, and you can't live your life around people that live that way. Well, because it's untenable.
But you have to have some emotional intuition, and some empathy.
Rain Man didn't.
Yeah, but again, do you think decisions that are predominantly what angle do you want that needle leaning? Towards emotion or towards logic? For me, I think logic. For me, logic too. And there's been times in my life where I've been in a situation and like I've been in a logical mindset. I'm like, oh, wait a second. This is not, I need to deal with feelings here. Like, and then I have to kind of fake it. And I'm just like, all right, like logically, how do I approach feelings? If I fuck it up. But I feel like I feel like sometimes I walk you in that direction. I'm like, dude, you need to step back from the logical answer here. But I mean, but my thinking is like, more extreme situations like breakups or fights, things like that, where people are just purely reacting to emotion and it's not getting them anywhere moving forward. And I feel like emotions hold people back and are very self-destructive for people. And obviously you want to act on some emotion. I'm not arguing that emotions are entirely bad. But I'm saying the majority of people who are acting on emotions are acting irrationally in the sense of against logic. Well, yeah, you can think of emotion as kind of the opposite of logic in a lot of times. Well, yeah, and today I got involved in the situation, and I realized that I was getting very frustrated, and I literally sent a text to the agents and said, "We'll talk about this later today. Or we'll talk about this later. We'll talk about this later because I cannot have a conversation." I started to have a conversation with. There ended up being like 3 or 4 people involved. Like it was this fucking waterfall cascade of shit that fucking came over the walls of my office this morning. But I took two of the people that were most involved, had them sit down in my office, and the thing is, when you're dealing with other people who are emotional, also they're entirely closed off to any logic that you have. So I'm in an emotional state, trying to shed some logical light on what's going on, and my logic is being interfered with, and they're not open to my logic.
Well, that's why when you've got people that are in a really agitated state, like trying to engage really in any capacity whatsoever is fruitless. So the best thing to do is like give them time to exit that state. So if you've got these agents or whatever that are both super emotional or whatever, you'd be like, you know what? Both of you take the day off. Let's meet tomorrow when everyone's cooled off.
Sure, I just don't want them to take the day off.
Or well, yeah, but the point, like, all right.
But no, I mean, if it's for the best, obviously. Sorry, go ahead.
There was something you mentioned that I want to throw out to the chat. I'm going to ask the question, and I'm going to give my answer, but I want to see what chat has to say on this one as well. Which is,
and you guys who are watching and listening to us live, feel free to throw your comments out there, especially if you're on Instagram. If you're on TikTok, we're not able to monitor all the comments real time, but if you're on Instagram watching us live, we have Rashed, who is watching and feeding us the comments through our screen because we're not
doing a great job, by the way. But the question I want to ask is, you were talking about breaking up and the emotion that goes in there, and the question I want to ask is, why do people stay in relationships that they know they shouldn't be in?
That's not exactly where I was thinking in the relationship point, but relationship angle. But that's a really good point, because that, I think, is, but sometimes even on a logical level, people psych themselves out of
right. But hold on, think about this. If you're in a relationship that you know you shouldn't be in, logically, you think there's all these negatives here, that this relationship is not making me better. I don't like being around this person a lot of the time. We get in fights all the time, and it's making my life worse. Yet, I don't break up with them. Why does that happen?
I think there's a lot of fear, which I think is a negative emotion.
Blondes have more fun agrees with me. Everyone needs to step back and deal later, talking about your office situation.
Yeah, but
take the day off. Let's talk tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, but relationships, here's when it comes to arguments in relationships, which I believe are mostly, you and I, James, we argue all the time. We don't argue in this fire and fury type way, but we have different points and we don't see eye to eye on things. And I think we do a really good job at discussing it and seeing each other's points.
Well, that's because it's not emotion. It's like, for you and me, argumentation is kind of a game.
It's kind of logic, and it's cool to be wrong in an argument with you because I usually learn something.
Yeah, have you learned to get your vaccine yet?
No, not yet. But I'm much more open to the idea. I did a lot of reflecting after that episode. I'm like, fuck, I need this is like one of those things I got to do. But
we're making progress, albeit slow.
So, but what I'm getting at is people in relationships. When people argue in relationships, they say things that like you just it's okay if you're in traffic. Like fuck you is okay in traffic, but it's not okay to the person that you need to be in a loving relationship that you're probably going to see again. Like giving somebody the finger in traffic and meaning like really fuck you. That's. I actually had on my ride to the train this morning, and it was all in my head. This woman was driving slow. She stopped at a yellow light. The light instantly turned red and then green arrow. So she stopped at this yellow light, and I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" And then it turned green. So like I was so mad. I didn't lay on the horn. I just double tapped the horn, beep beep, and she moved. But obviously the light turned green, and then she drove slow as shit to the exact same parking lot that I did. So
I've heard plenty of stories of like people in your position being dicks to drivers, and then like I'm about to go on an interview, and like I flip off the guy that's driving slow, and then I walk in, and guess who's interviewing me?
Yeah, luckily we didn't end up getting on the same train. She went to like a business that shared a parking lot with the train parking lot. I may have ridden her ass a little bit in traffic, but I wasn't obnoxious. I didn't give her the finger. I didn't lay down on the horn, but I was definitely frustrated. And she was also going, it was like a 45 mile an hour. She's doing 28 miles an hour, and then she's doing 55 miles an hour. I'm just like, what the fuck is going on with you?
Man. All right, so Gabriel Campo says, like, the reason why people don't break up with somebody, even though feelings of failure, that you might come off as a hard-hearted person because you might not, and others might not understand the reasons for leaving.
Look, but the most difficult breakups that I've dealt with were relationships that a part of me didn't want to ruin, and I was happy with a lot of aspects of the relationship, but I always put myself in this logical situation where I kept, and I asked myself many times until probably my answer changed, can I deal with this in 10 years? What will this be like in 10 years? Is this something I'm cool with now that's getting worse? Or is this something I'm cool with now, but after enough repetition, I'm not going to be cool with it in 10 years? And, sometimes my stance on that has changed. I'm not going to be cool with it. Nothing's changed, or it's going to get even worse in 10 years. But breakups are tough, man, because a lot of times the relationship is your structure for life. It's the person you see every day. It's, I've been lucky enough to have lived with women where they, do cooking or do laundry or something like that, which I don't typically do very much of. I may cook like a big meal once in a while, but I don't like to cook on a regular basis. And I don't do laundry. I'd rather pay to have it done. But when you have a breakup like that, it's very destructive to how your life is. You get used to this kind of cycle and repetition. So
I've got a different answer, which is super logical. But
let me just clarify. I wouldn't not break up with someone because of laundry or something like that. Those were poor examples of how having someone else in your life. They were very poor examples. This is just the first thing that came to mind. But sorry, go ahead.
So my answer is kind of a version of the sunk cost fallacy, where
that's a good one. Yeah.
So the example I would use is if you're playing a game of poker and you start off and you've got your hand, and the first round of betting, you're like, this is decent enough, I'll play it. And so you put in $100. And then the next round, like the next cards come out, and you're like, all right, that's not great, but it's not terrible. So, and then the next round of betting, you have to answer a bet, and the bet's for $70. And you're like, well, I'm already in for 100, and like I still have a chance, so I'll pay 70. So now you're in for 170. Next card comes out, and you're just like, all right, that didn't really help me at all. And the bet comes in at $50. And you're like, well, I'm in for 150. What's another, like 170? What's another $50? I still have a chance. So you put in $50.
But
and so a relationship is like that, where you get invested and you become less and less happy, but at the same time, like the investment,
you've already got this sunken investment.
You've already got so much invested that you're like, what's another $10? I'm already $1,000 deep. And I'm not talking monetary for the relationship. I'm talking about just like, I have to go this little extra step further to try and keep this relationship alive. Whereas if that had happened in the first week or whatever, you're like, I'm not doing it. Like,
but what about people who are financially dependent on each other?
Well, then you also have, like if you're in a relationship where like, if you're living with someone and they're the one who's paying rent and you don't have the money to be able to afford living on your own, then you can get trapped in a relationship because you're financially dependent on somebody.
Oh, that's gotta be terrible. But that's like, that comes to like your values. Are you 35 years old living with somebody and you don't want to go and live with your parents, or maybe rent a really shitty place for a little while? But yeah, man, or go get roommates.
You can also have situations where your lives become entangled, where like if you're living with somebody and now you've got like a pet together and it's your pet and their pet.
I hate this example, but you have a good point, because some people get so tied.
Again, this isn't something that really appeals to either you or I, but we have to acknowledge the phenomenon.
I completely agree with you. Yeah. That's like for many people, that's like their child.
Well, and then there's also like if you're in a relationship and you got kids, either with the person or the person had kids from before you, and you built a relationship with that kid, and now the relationship's ending, and you still love the kid, and it's not the kid's fault that you're breaking up, but now you're not going to see the kid anymore.
Well, but that's part of life, man.
Well, that's why I have a policy of not dating anybody that has kids,
but no, I mean, that's, like, that's life. You have to, you can't sacrifice total happiness in your life, because really, and it depends on how bad the relationship is. If the relationship isn't an A+, 5-star relationship, but it's good, like, really, if you get out of this relationship, are you going to end up in a better relationship?
What's the angriest you've ever been in a relationship?
Dude, don't ask me this while we're live. No, I don't think I get that angry. I've dealt with kind of some frustrating situations, but
I'll answer.
But hold on, my thinking is just like, it gets to my point where I'm like, in 10 years, is this something that either of us wants to be in? And oftentimes it's a kind of this mutual parting of ways, because we're just not happy, and the compromise is too great on both sides to find that happiness. It's not an achievable happiness. Sorry, go ahead. What's the angriest you've been in a relationship, James?
I was accused of doing something that I didn't do, and she wouldn't hear anything of it. And I got so frustrated that she wouldn't believe me that I threw a chair like 15 feet across the room. Not at her, just across the room.
It's just like but I don't think that's very uncommon. And it's just, and that's a wild aspect of fucking relationships, where, like, in no other aspect in life will you throw a chair. I mean, no. I may have in the office, but dude.
But I was that angry because, like, she wouldn't believe me, and there was no way. The way that she framed it was in such a way that there was no way that I could prove that I was right. It was like the question and the accusation were designed in such a way that it was impossible for me to refute it, despite the fact that it didn't happen.
But those are the situations where sometimes you got to be like, peace, I got to take a walk around the block. I haven't been drinking much lately, which is, I enjoy. I don't drink a lot. I enjoy, have a frustrating morning. I'll go out, have a couple of beers at lunch, come back, and I'm not like getting obliterated with lunch, but it's a nice step out.
Justin, you should read some of these comments.
Yeah, I'm Justin seems like a pretty peaceful and mellow guy, but one you wouldn't want to see angry. I get that. I can tell you also, 25 years of marriage and divorce happens because people change, and I get that, and that's what I was saying in putting things into perspective. In 10 years, is this something you can deal with, or in 10 years is that aspect of the relationship, or that whatever that person's doing, is that going to get worse? I
kind of want to respond to the people change thing, because I don't think it's realistic at all to start a relationship with somebody and expect them to be the same person in 1, 5, 10, or 25 years. Were the changes commensurate with what would be reasonable?
Well, yeah, I totally get that. I don't know, but let me hit some of my notes here, because I want to talk about feelings, and we're talking about relationships now.
Yeah, but how is that unexpected?
No, I get it, and I'm not saying we can't go back to it. But yeah, I hit the point where when you argue with people, it needs to be a means towards a solution, not a fuck you, you're a bitch, go fuck yourself.
Like, it makes me think of a stand-up comedian. His line is like, I'd get in fights with my girlfriend, and like, it would start off really, really tame, or like, I really wish that you'd take the trash out. And then be like, well, I wish that you weren't a mama's boy and had a small dick. Like, whoa, we went there already? Like, guess I'll take the trash out. I'm really a little more concerned about this small dick thing.
But that's the shit. Like, that's so fucked up with people. They say these hurtful things in relationships. If you're that type of person who argues like that, like, you are the one with the problem. You can't. That's a relationship that needs to end. Like, you need to fix that shit, man. And it's
John Caparulo, for those who are listening.
Okay.
Just got to give credit where it is.
Yeah, but like, I have agents that when something doesn't go their way, they criticize me, and they get really upset with like my management style or something like that. I'm like, bro, like, that's fucking life, dude. Like, that's like why nothing's changed for me day to day. It's just something didn't go your way and now you're mad.
Well, people don't want to take responsibility for their failings.
Or for other people's failings when those other people are in their charge. That was another aspect of the argument this morning, is there was someone who did something wrong and I went to their supervisor who was like, this isn't my problem. And I was like, wait a second, it's my problem. Like, I had nothing to do with this. I'm frustrated because I let you go far enough that you could let this go, and it happened. So even though I didn't do anything, I'm taking 100% responsibility. I'm asking for more than 0% responsibility from you.
That doesn't make much sense. Like, if you're someone who's like supervising somebody else and like they screw up, then like it's on you to fix it. Like when I'm in the office, dude, like I've got a couple people that help me out with some bookkeeping projects, and then I'll go over them, and then like I'm the one who prepares the return and everything else. So if the return comes back really bad or something, and one of the partners says, "Hey, why did this get screwed up?" I'll be like, "Well, the intern did the bookkeeping for me and I trusted it." And they're like, "You didn't look at it?"
Exactly. Well, that's my point. And if that return gets back to the client, or the fact, if it continues to happen, that's now on the partner, right?
Right.
So the partner acknowledges that everything that happens in his charge is to a degree his responsibility and to 100% his responsibility, because at the end of the day, it all falls on him. So,
right. So it all comes down to how much does the partner trust me? And I have to recognize that I'm being trusted a certain amount, and the work that I do has to be in line with the amount of trust I'm given. And so if I screw up, it needs to be something that is basically at a level above my head. Anything below my head, I'm responsible for. And knowing what the expectations are, but it's if I've got somebody else who in the office who's helping me with work, and they screw something up, it's my job to catch it if it's something that I'm expected to catch. If it were my own work, would that be an acceptable mistake for me to make?
That's how I look at it. And that's where I got frustrated today, because it was more of like a conditioning thing, and the agent thought something could slide that could have in most cases, but is just something that like a solid agent wouldn't let slide, and it needs to be tuned up. And the fact that rather than acknowledging that, yeah, you're right, we shouldn't have said that, we shouldn't have let it slide, it does need to be tuned up. They're like, well, the market's slow anyways right now. That's how it should be. That it should be okay. Like that's not a cool answer, and that's where I got frustrated as well.
Yo, I like this. I like this comment. The first 9 months of seeing someone, you aren't seeing the real person, but their representative salesperson.
The representative salesperson.
I like that a lot.
But no, I definitely think I will, and I think 9 months is kind of a weird arbitrary.
It's kind of a long time. I'd say like 2 or 3 months.
But that also depends. It depends on how much time you're spending with them, how often you're seeing them, the context in which you're seeing them. So let's see what else.
I don't know. I like that analogy. It's good.
So it also on here's my next note, is that on your feelings aren't important, is that your feelings are very important to you, but you have to understand that they're not half as important to anyone else. They're not even a fraction of that as important to anybody else. And if you expect everybody else to be taking your feelings into account, you might as well be walking around with a blindfold on and expecting
you're just being
people to step out of your way. But yeah, I mean, if you're people aren't going to tiptoe around your feelings in real life. This isn't kindergarten. And if your feelings get hurt, like, that's life, man. And we're spending so much time coddling everybody, which is why we're having these generations of just weaker and weaker people. And I have a theory that we're going to have a super weak generation because the previous generation did a really good job parenting. That kids didn't go through much adversity, and everybody feels super entitled now.
Back in my day, we had to walk to school 10 miles uphill both ways.
Dude, I think we had a great, like in retrospect, I think I had a great upbringing. And obviously we dealt with certain types of adversity growing up, but I still think generally like we got pretty lucky.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, but yeah, just to reiterate, don't expect people to value your feelings the way that you do.
Okay, another question.
All right.
What's the funniest emotion?
In what context?
No context. What's the most humorous emotion?
Probably confusion. Other people's confusion. At least. Very frustrating when you're confused.
Sometimes it's funny when you're confused, though.
Well, it can be, especially in retrospect.
I actually think that anger is the funniest emotion. Because
really?
when you see, because anger is by definition irrational. Like irrational anger. Like think about how many comedians that you watch where like they're expressing anger at something that when you think about it is completely unbased. But
well, it's something that you should be, that is just a normality, but is a frustrating thing that you're.
Yeah.
That's the shit that I get angry about. I get really upset and really pissed really fucking fast about little shit. But like the big shit, I just hit like full zen for the most part. And I'm like, all right, I need to come up with a logical solution to deal with this for the heavy stuff. The little shit, like people driving slow or, people trying to put fucking bananas in my protein shake. Every time I order a protein shake, they try to put a fucking banana in there. I said, I didn't ask for banana. Oftentimes, when I order the shake, I say no banana. And they're like, banana? I'm like, no banana. That's the shit that drives me nuts. Invalidating someone's feelings is an easy way to make them feel alone. And that's when everything goes downhill. I have notes. On that. I have it's embracing feelings, emotional invalidation, rejecting a person's thoughts or feelings, or judging them on their thoughts and feelings. But that's where I want to back up. That if you're expecting people to take your feelings into account, it's one thing if it's someone you're in a romantic relationship with. I think you should expect more on an emotional level and a higher level of emotional understanding for someone that you share romantic space with. What?
The funniest emotion is being angry and horny at the same time.
Dude, all right, let me get back to the emotional.
I don't know how you pull that off.
People hate fuck each other all the time, I guess. I don't know. That's not something. It's not. I can't get there. But no. Let me get back to the emotional invalidation because I want to harp on that for a minute. Just about if you're expecting other people to validate your emotions, and I think, I don't think that's. Think about when you watch people in public experiencing high levels of emotion, whether it's anger or confusion, or all these Karens, with iPhones pointed at them. Their emotions are not being validated by anybody, and it's very frustrating for them. But
so I don't know what your reaction is, but whenever I see someone that's super emotional in public, I want to be as far away as possible.
Yeah, I completely agree. The comment was, how old are these people you have in your office? They sound like kindergarten. I have a guy in my office. He's probably in his 60s. And I told him yesterday, I said, look, I don't want you to think I'm being condescending. But just remember that this isn't a third grade classroom. So I'm not here to navigate around your feelings or emotions, but I'm here to point out stupid shit when you do it. So I want to preface with that. And I have a lot of conversations where I preface with, this isn't a third grade classroom, so don't get offended. Just take it for what it is. And then him and I had a very kind of eye-to-eye conversation about me explaining to him how the emails that he's sending don't seem to make very much sense. And when people receive the emails, that that he needs to tune up his writing skills. And he's somebody who obviously can write because he was probably trained much better at writing, than anybody in the current generation. But oftentimes it feels like I'm just dealing with a bunch of middle schoolers. And I think adults naturally don't get along. I think a lot of people just naturally don't get along. Look at how, ask yourself, how many close friends you have and how many close friends you've lost because of issues. I think probably those numbers they fluctuate more on the women end of things, but you know, people don't get along, man. And that's
well, I think that most people find that as they get older, maintaining a high number of relationships becomes increasingly taxing. So people naturally kind of just pare down their social relationships to smaller and smaller numbers.
I completely agree with that. But also a lot of times shit happens and people push each other away.
Yeah, but
shit's bound to happen. And rather than just cutting people off, like I think the more friends that you have, like the higher value of a life that you have.
I disagree. I think that having a high number of friends is meaningless. It's
Well, I mean, I will agree with you that a high quantity of friends doesn't make you a more valuable person, especially if they're not close friends. And it's impossible to have 1,000 or even 100 super close friends. I get that.
okay.
But I'm just saying that, like, if you, it's I don't know. It's just frustrating to see people push each other away as adults because of misunderstandings and just emotional bullshit.
Sometimes it's temporary. Like the Derv, who I'm super close with, there was a period of time where I didn't really talk to him at all because he was dating somebody that I couldn't stand. And I even told him, I was like, I can't go to your place because she's there and I don't want to be around her. So I kind of pushed him away because I couldn't stand his girlfriend. And then once, like literally the minute he broke up with her, I was there for him. So
yeah, well, but that's a good friend. You were a good friend the whole time, but you had to back off. And I have that going on with another friend. I'm not going to name any names. I'm just like, dude, you came to me asking you not to do the dumb shit in terms of dating, and now you're doing that, and I have to step back because my duty to you as a friend is to have your back and try to align you with positive things. And you're asking me to get involved in this relationship, and it's not.
Does the female do choreography?
Something along those lines, but that's another conversation. Not happening here. All right, let me see. Okay, what about people that are depressed? We're going through rough times emotionally. How do they fix that?
Well, depends on two things. One, is it kind of acute depression where something shitty happened and you're processing it, or is this more of like a pervasive and clinical depression?
Well, people that are up in their feelings all the time, and constantly, I'm kind of getting at somebody, and I'll let you answer both sides of that if you want. But I'm getting at somebody that's constantly getting frustrated that they're having negative feelings, and they're not being validated by others.
Okay. So I think in the case where if you're having negative feelings and they're not being validated by others, and this is a conversation I've had with some people in my life, that getting validation through others is doomed to failure. That you're never going to be able to get the validation that you want through others. You need to find a way of achieving internal validation. And getting the approval of others is impossible to achieve consistently. And the only way that you're going to really be able to do that is by surrounding yourself with yes men. And that means that you're never going to have a check on whether or not you're doing things correctly. So external validation fails. Internal validation can also fail because it can lead to rationalization of all behavior, right or wrong. So there has to be kind of a mix where you need to have somebody in your life, and it can either be a trusted family member, a close friend, or for those who have the resource available, a therapist that can provide kind of an unbiased but supportive outlook as to where you actually stand. And you need to have enough of a trust in them to take what they say to you and actually implement it.
Well,
And that's where good therapy comes in, is being
Good
able
therapy.
to get that kind of feedback of, are these feelings valid? And if so, what should you do to act on them? Or if these feelings are invalid, what's the cause of that? What's the etiology of this incorrect thinking that's causing you to have these feelings, and how can we correct it? So that's the answer there, is that you need to have somebody that you trust that can provide feedback to you about whether or not you are justified in your emotions. Now, for people that are suffering from longer term depression or whatever.
Hang on 1 second, though, because I just want to double down on that, is where I was talking about my friend who basically came to me asking me for that advice. I gave it, and then they didn't follow that advice and is now asking for my cooperation in them taking the opposite advice. I'm not interested.
Right? No. I gave you my advice. You chose to ignore it. Now you're complaining that things didn't work out. I'm not helping you.
I didn't just give my advice. My advice was solicited and begged. So
Right. I can think of another friend of ours that's a mutual friend that asks for advice consistently, that would then never take it. And I got to the point where when he asked me for advice, I was just like, I'm not even bothering. I'm not going to waste the time, because you don't listen to what I have to say anyways. The last couple of times that you asked me for advice, I've given it, been proven right. And then you complain because.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. All right. So.
And you know who I'm talking about.
I know you're talking about. So get on with the longer term depression.
That's a much more difficult question to solve, because this
is where I think logical action needs to take place. And my note on that was,
doesn't work that way. So
sure, but you have two options. You either have to fix it with internal logic on your own, or you take drugs. But it's a really difficult hole to get out of. And you either need to figure out what's going to make you happy and then take regular action towards that goal, or you have to figure out what's causing you grief and take regular action to get that aspect out of your life.
So here's the problem, because what you're saying is very logical, but it's missing one really key aspect, which is, if you get into a deep enough depression, the question of what makes me happy becomes nothing. Nothing makes me happy. I don't know how to find happiness anymore.
But then you need to figure out what's causing you that stress.
So second answer is the question of what is causing me to be unhappy is going to be either I can't figure it out, I don't know what makes me unhappy, I just am, or it's literally everything makes me unhappy.
Well, and that requires some real psychoanalysis and possibly drugs. But I think a lot of people think that they're in that position and they're in a solvable solution. Or a lot of times there's an aspect of laziness. You know, people have to be proactive in terms of doing things. And a lot of times I'm super proactive. And when I'm not, I feel really guilty and I get really anxious.
Well, and I want to answer this comment, and you're going to be the one. I'm going to ask you this question. So Gabriella asks, I think this is your friend whose significant other does choreography. Is this a logically thinking friend or someone who understands emotions better?
This is a friend that's not. Well, he's probably acting on emotions
right now. But does he normally think logically? I would say yes.
I would also think yes as well. So, very frustrating for me. All right, I lost my train of thought. We were just talking about depression, and to me, I think a lot of there's a reason why exercise is a great solution for depression often, and a lot of times it's just action. And obviously, exercise is good for hormones and chemicals in your brain, but also just if it's in my opinion, the act of taking action that is going to help you take additional actions in your life. So if you're going out for a jog or you're going out to the gym versus sitting at home doing nothing, it's the taking the initiative and taking action that's putting you in the right direction. But it's the inaction that's keeping you in that depression.
The problem is when you get to a deep enough point that the simple act of trying to go out for a jog or something feels like an insurmountable hurdle.
Well, sure, but you've gotten to that point. So if you're in that point, you need professional help. But for a lot of people who think they're at that point, probably they're not. And there are things that they should be doing. But I have this conversation with agents all the time. Agents will come to me and they'll tell me what's going on with their deal. And I said, look, when you're driving on the road and it's bad weather, I can help to give you some tips to keep your car on the road. All right. But when you're doing 80 miles an hour and you're already off the side of the road and it's covered in ice and you're aiming towards a tree, I can't stop your car from hitting the tree, man. Like you're too late into it. So I'm here to help you. But at a certain point, when you're past that, like you just got to own it, man. Like, and if that's seeking professional help, that's seeking professional help. But obviously there's certain major chemical imbalances and situations that people are in that require, like severe drug addiction. I can't just tell you go for a jog and then the next day go for a jog and do a puzzle or some shit and your life's going to get better.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, I would say that in my adult life, I've only been severely depressed once, and it was for a very short period of time. And you actually were a part of this. If you remember, about 5 years ago when I flew up to New York.
Mm-hmm.
So about 2 days before that, not going into the precipitating events, but I don't need to share them.
Yeah.
Because I flew up on a Sunday. I remember that Friday, I had like one thing to do that day, which was to drop off a resume at a place, and I didn't have anything else to do. And I was so depressed, I couldn't do anything. I was on the computer and I would try and read a news article or play a video game or whatever. And as soon as I started doing any of those things, I would just be angry and I wouldn't be able to focus. Even things that normally distract me and make me feel good, like playing a video game or whatever, I couldn't focus on. And so I eventually was able to get myself out of the apartment and drive and drop off the resume to something. But the amount of effort it took for me to put myself together professionally, get in the car, drive 3 miles and give a resume to a stranger and then drive back, it felt like I was training for a marathon.
I fully believe that. And I have been in some pretty deep and dark places. I get that. But I've also been in some bad places too, where I have to be public and show face on a regular basis. And that's really tough too. But yeah, I mean, depression is no joke. So if you're listening to us and you have depression or somebody who has depression, there's I don't know what they are, but I know there's professional resources out there. We'll see if we can get Rosh to send some links. And if you're watching this on YouTube or you're watching it,
let's close with this comment because
we'll throw some links and resources out there for you.
Amex, who's had some pretty quality comments tonight, said, coming someone who suffered from depression, the only people who can truly help us are ourselves, and no one else can help us get out of there, which I think is true. But that's not to say that if you're depressed, you can't rely on people that are close to you to give you a hand up.
No, I definitely think you have a very good point there.
It was that 5 years ago thing. I flew into Newburgh Airport, and I remember you drove up and picked me up at the airport, and we had drinks at your apartment in Manhattan, and we talked about things. And then I took your Porsche up to Albany and had a couple days there. But you coming out to help me out and giving me a place to stay for a night, my family being there, and you letting me borrow your car and everything. By the time I got back to Charleston, it was only 3 days. But by the time I got back to Charleston, I wasn't completely out of it, but I was back to the point where I was I can face life again. And if it weren't for help that you gave me and my family gave me, I don't know what would have happened. Not I wouldn't have committed suicide, but it would have taken a lot longer for me to snap out of it.
It probably would have taken longer. And I remember that well. And in that moment, I was very happy to be your friend and happy that you came up and actually took some action to do something about it. And it
had a huge impact. It really did.
I was happy to have a Porsche to loan you for the weekend too. That was nice. Maybe a Triumph TR3 or Spitfire in the future. But we got to run because we are hitting our time limit right here. James, I will catch up with you on the next episode. Thank you guys so much for joining. If you guys are watching us live, please go to YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, go to the audio podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your audio podcasts, and just subscribe. Even if you don't listen to us, subscribe. It's going to help us out. And if you do listen to us,
I want to give the shout outs to the commenters. We had some really good comments tonight. Gabriella, Stars and Stripes, Amex. Amex had some really good ones. And congrats to you for losing the 50 pounds and snapping out of the depression, man.
Yeah, that was we got some good comments here. So we're going to continue to monitor the comments. If you guys do watch post-production YouTube or you're listening on the audio podcast, shoot me a DM, make some comments. Let me know what you want to hear about. Give us your feedback because we really do thrive on that. But on that note, I will catch everyone later. James, I'll talk to you soon. Adios.
Peace.
All right, that's it. That is the end of the podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. If you have not already, please subscribe. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening, watching, and joining our lives. I appreciate every one of you. I truly do. And I try really hard to catch up on all the messages. So thank you for that. I'll see you guys next time.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.